A series doesn't fail when it ends. It fails when it doesn't finish. That's the difference most people miss. Because in television, ending is not the problem. Interruption is. And when you look closely at the career of Seçkin Özdemir, a pattern begins to appear, not of dramatic failures but of something quieter. Stories that never reach their full form. At the beginning, it doesn't seem critical. A show ends early, that happens. Another doesn't continue, still normal. But then it repeats. And repetition changes everything. Because television doesn't measure effort. It measures survival. And survival is the first requirement for legacy. But things didn't stop because of a single issue. They stopped because of structure. Because in this system, nothing is guaranteed. Not the cast, not the production, not even the story. Every episode is a test. Every week is a decision point. And if certain conditions don't align early, the system reacts immediately. Strong openings, stable retention, network support, audience attachment. If even two of these weaken, the risk increases. And in several of Seçkin's projects, those pillars didn't fully align. Not completely broken, but not strong enough either. And in television, not strong enough is already a problem. Because the system doesn't wait. It doesn't give time to grow. It reacts to signals. And early signals decide everything. But the real turning point isn't just cancellation. It's what happens before it. Because once a show is labeled as underperforming, it enters a different phase. Scripts compress. Stories accelerate unnaturally. Characters lose depth. Creative ambition shrinks. And suddenly, the goal is no longer to build something, but to exit cleanly. And once that shift happens, recovery is almost impossible, because the system has already moved on. But here's where the damage becomes deeper than a single project. Because incomplete stories don't just disappear. They leave something behind. A break in trust. Audiences don't just watch. They invest time, attention, emotion, and they expect something in return. Closure. When that closure doesn't come, something changes. Not dramatically, but subtly. The next time a new show appears, the audience hesitates. They don't commit immediately. They wait. They observe. They hold back. And that hesitation affects the most critical phase. The beginning. Because early engagement drives survival. And reduced engagement weakens the opening. And weak openings lead back to the same outcome. And just like that, a loop begins. But the impact doesn't stop with the audience. It reaches the networks. Because networks don't operate on hope. They operate on probability. And probability is built from history. If an actor is associated with long-running success, confidence increases. Investment grows. But if the pattern shows repeated early endings, confidence adjusts. Not aggressively, but gradually. Budgets become more cautious. Promotion becomes more limited. Time slots become less favorable. And patience becomes shorter. And this is where the shift becomes structural. Not visible, but always present. But the most underestimated loss isn't opportunity. It's legacy. Because iconic characters don't appear instantly. They grow. Episode after episode. Conflict after conflict. They evolve. They stay. They repeat. And through that repetition, they become memory. But when a story ends early, that process breaks. Characters are introduced, but never completed. Arcs begin, but never resolve. Transformation starts, but never finishes. And without time, there is no permanence. And without permanence, there is no cultural memory. Which means, even strong performances don't stay. But there's another layer that rarely gets discussed. The internal effect. Because actors notice patterns, they understand instability. And when projects don't last, something shifts in how they approach their work. Risk becomes smaller. Choices become safer. Experimentation decreases. Not intentionally, but as a response. Because when survival is uncertain, stability becomes the priority. But here's the paradox. Safety reduces attention, and attention is what's needed to break the pattern. And that creates a conflict between protecting stability and creating impact. And this is where everything connects. Because incomplete series don't just end. They create a cycle. Low engagement leads to early endings. Early endings reduce audience trust. Reduced trust weakens future openings. Weak openings lead to low engagement again. And once that cycle stabilizes, it becomes very difficult to escape. Because each step reinforces the next. And breaking it requires something rare. A disruption. A project that doesn't just perform, but dominates. A shift that changes perception immediately. Without that, the pattern continues. And that's what defines this trajectory. Not one failure, not one decision, but accumulation. Projects that didn't last long enough. Stories that didn't complete. Momentum that couldn't stabilize. And a system that reacts quickly, but rarely forgives patterns. So when you look at Seçkin Özdemir, the question isn't just why some series ended early. The deeper question is this. What happens to a career when stories never reach completion? Because in television, unfinished stories don't just disappear. They reshape everything that comes next.